Welcome everyone. Welcome to episode 106 of Wool and Spinning. My name is Rachel. I can be found pretty much everywhere as well for pearls. We have a massive show today. So I'm hoping that we can cover everything. I'm just turning my phone off. I'm actually not sure that we are going to be able to cover everything, but we will try. We have the Patreon calendar giveaway. We have the October fiber giveaway, and I need to announce a November giveaway. And I also have breed and color study. All right, Patreon calendar giveaway this month. This is something that I give away every month to our patrons of the show. Your name may or may not get drawn if you're a patron of the show. Thank you so much to those who support through Patreon. The calendar looks like this. There will be a new one coming out in January, which is the one that I am mailing out right now. If you're new to the show and this is your first time tuning in, thank you so much for checking me out. And if you're curious about the Patreon support, please head over to patreon.com/wellforpearls. And for those who are returning viewers and continuing to watch the show month to month, I really appreciate you supporting the show by watching. And thank you so much for being here. So this month for Patreon, it was Carolyn Lucas that won. I have already messaged you, Carolyn, about your mailing address, and congratulations. For the October giveaway, we have this cool, let me move all this stuff. Now you guys know what's up and coming in this episode because it's all sitting here looking pretty. Except that it's like really heavy because it's wet. Let's just move that out of the way. So this is the was the October fiber giveaway. This is going to Jessica of Stitch Crafty. She has already sent me her mailing address. I did have it at one point, Jess. I'm sorry, I just couldn't find it when I was looking this morning. This is some Smith & You pencil roving. I think it's Superwash BFL. It is, and that is going out to Jessica. So congratulations. She was post number 2 on the October episode thread, and yeah, that. Congratulations to Jessica. She spins on a shacked ladybug because I asked everybody what their wheel was that they spin on. So congratulations, Jessica. I will get that out in the mail to you actually in the next couple of days because I have some other stuff that needs to go out as well. We have breed and color studies to talk about. For those who have not participated in a breed and color study before, and need just a really quick kind of rundown on what it is all about, this is it. So basically with breed and color study, it is an opportunity for the wool and spinning community to come together and to spin at the same time some fiber. Katrina and I choose the breed, and you guys usually dictate to us what the colors are and what we will be studying. This study that's going to run from, it started in October, on October 1st, and I will talk about that in just a minute, and it will run until the end of March. The colors were dictated by the study that we did last time and back in the fall, based on some feedback, well, not some, copious feedback that you guys gave us in terms of what you wanted to study next. And so often what I have found is that the color studies have kind of built on each other. So every time we do a color study, there's ideas and comments and thoughts that come out of it, and then it kind of builds on it and goes to the next. And that helps me and Katrina to build on it and go to the next study. And then that study builds itself, and learnings happen, and then we go on to the next study, and so on and so forth. So with this study, we're back to comb top. So we alternate in the spring, summer between, that's usually the carded study. That one runs from the beginning of April until the end of September. And then from October till the end of March, we do a combed study. So we look at combed fiber, colors in combing, and kind of go through it that way and flip back and forth so that we can learn different color management techniques from the two. So because carded fibers spin up differently than combed fibers and vice versa. So this study started on October 1st. What we asked you guys to do was we generated a whole bunch of photos in the Ravelry thread, and Katrina continually kept scrolling through every time you guys posted photos. There was a massive variety this time in terms of photos. All we asked for was something that you had found inspiring. There were lots of photos of kids, lots of photos of family vacations. It was really cool to scroll through. So there were 4 photos that Katrina and I kept coming back to. The one that I kept coming back to, we're going to save for a future study. And in the end, we settled on this one. And actually, I'm kind of bummed to see that Megan is not in the chat today because it's actually her photo. So Megan on Ravelry is Likey Megan, L-Y-K-K-E, like the needles, Meg. And Megan posted this photo. It's of stars. There are a lot of color in here, even if you can't really see how much color is in here. When you really start to study it, and when Katrina broke down the colors that are in this, there were a lot of colors. So if you guys would like to see the colors that were in it, let me just change the cameras around. The one thing I will say about this image is it's overly simplistic. It looks like a simple image when you first look at it. And that's where Katrina and I really like to focus, is looking at some of these images that are really, really, really simple and pulling out the colors in them and the interest in them and then creating a colorway. And I think that's where Katrina's color sense is just really shines. So for those of you who don't know Katrina, she is Crafty Jack's Boutique. She is a dyer. She spins, she knits, she crochets, she does all the things. But she is also one of my best friends, and she's very involved with this wool and spinning community. So if you're curious about learning more about Katrina, you can find her on Instagram at Crafty Jacks, and she's also got an Etsy shop, Crafty Jack's Boutique, and a website, craftyjacks.ca, I think it is. So Megan's photo was the one that got picked, and then let me switch cameras around. I'm always really excited when we introduce the colors for our color study, because the breed is really exciting, and it's really cool to delve into a new breed and to look at a new breed, usually because there's several people in the community who haven't spun that particular breed before. Like last time around we did Targi, you would think for many, many North American spinners that it was something that many of us had spun, but it was actually an amazing number of people in the community that hadn't spun Targi before. And I'm hoping that that's the case with this study as well. So as you can see, this is not fiber. This is already spun. This is commercial yarn. So these are the colors from that photo on yarn. So let me just take a minute, and I'm just going to put them in order. And I'm probably going to mess it up because Katrina had them in like a totally different order from this. But I'll just match them up to my camera so you can see them. So if anybody knows me, and if you've been watching this for a while, and if you watch the kind of colors that I am drawn to, this is my color palette. If you were ever looking for a gift for me, this is my color palette. This is my hair color, and these are the colors that I wear. So when I saw them laying on Katrina's dining room table this morning, I actually kind of laughed out loud because I was like, you know, those are my colors, right? And we had a good laugh about it. So what makes this color study really interesting is we have a very broad spectrum of color. The only colors that are not in here are true reds and pinks and purples. So we've got a big color spectrum here. Some would say that this is a rainbow. We're missing some key colors, but it is very much a color continuum. So these are the colors individually. Now, normally with the breed and color study, we would have wanted to have gotten the fiber out, dyed and out to you guys about 2 weeks ago, because this is already the middle of November. It's November 14th of 2018. But unfortunately, that was delayed because after Knit City back in October, which is a massive fiber festival for us here, Katrina got really sick. And she's basically had her cold ever since, and she hasn't been able to shake it. And I didn't want to start putting a bunch of pressure on her and be like, come on, come on, come on, we need our color study. Because this isn't like it's running for a couple weeks. This is running for many months. So yeah, we maybe are delayed by a week or two. Not a big deal. I would way rather that my friend got better. So she will be releasing the colorways, which I will show you in just a sec, on, write this down, especially patrons, November 23rd. And we will release the actual time that the shop update will go live. I will release that to you guys in the next week or so once Katrina lets me know. So November 23rd, write it on your calendar. Once the fiber is gone, it is gone. So once it's sold, that's it. There will be no more. So November 23rd is when the shop update will go live and you guys will be able to purchase. So what are we purchasing? And if you have, oh, and I should tell you what the fiber is. That's the most exciting part. So we are studying this time round. We are studying Masham. So, which I've spun Masham. I love Masham. It is one of my favorite fibers to spin. Some people say there is such a thing as medium wools. Some people say no, it's not. There are no such things as medium wools. I think Masham, in the Fleece and Fiber source book, Katrina and I were looking at it. It's classified as a miscellaneous wool. It's sort of in other. This fiber is very long stapled. I think you could actually probably argue that this is a long wool. It just doesn't have the sheen and the luster of a long wool. Just give me a second while I set this up for you guys so you can really see this colorway. So this is our primary colorway. This is the fiber dyed with the colors, no white, no black added. And if you tuned into the woolen spinning episode, woolen spinning radio episode at the beginning of this month, you will know that we are doing white and black this color study. We are looking at white and black. So I'm going to tell you right now, I love this. I've already asked Katrina if I can possibly have another braid of this. So this is really cool. It's all of the colors dyed in a continuous, they repeat. How many times do they repeat, Katrina? She's just popped into the, yeah, she told me I totally messed up the colors when they were laying out. It's this rusty red color, and then this sort of ochre yellow color, forest green into the gray green and the light green. So these ones, so this one and then this one over up here, those are those two colors in here. And then you've got that bright blue, light green blue, she calls it. And then medium blue, medium green, dark green. Anyways, they're all in there. So that is what the colorway looks like dyed with no space dyeing and no black added. So you guys tell me, do you want to see the space dyed next on white or space dyed on black? So there are 3 braids this time round. There is the primary colorway so that you guys have a control. And then we have the white space dyed, which is the colorway space dyed on white. And then we have the colorway space dyed on black. Oh, good. I'm glad you guys are excited about the Masham. It is gorgeous. It is absolutely gorgeous, Megan. I'm very excited about this colorway. It's just awesome. Oh no, Becca's husband has shingles. I'm so sorry to hear that, Becca. That's just awful. I'm just looking at the chat because I'm waiting for you guys to tell me if you want to see the white or the black next. And then we'll get on with the show. I have some spinning growths to talk about today. Okay, Becca, you win. You said white first. Okay, the white I'm really excited about. So in our fin study last year, the colorway that most people were the most surprised by was Fractured Dawn, which was space dyed. And most of us had sort of written it off and weren't as excited to spin that colorway, and everybody loved it in the end. So I'm very excited about this one. I'm really excited to see how the white interplays with all of the color, and to see how these colors end up pastel and muted a little bit, but also because of the staple length of the Masham. I'll show you the staple length. I wonder if I can get my combs. And let's do the staple length really quick. So one sec. I said to Katrina this morning that I'm pretty sure the staple length is like 12 inches. And I don't think I'm that far off. So to check the staple length, I'm just going to take my mini combs And I'm just going to lash on a little bit of fiber. Yeah, like look at that. That's crazy. It's wider than my head. So this is one. So some of the fibers in there are that long. Some of the fibers in here are this long, which are only about an inch shorter. And so the bulk of the fiber in there is that long. Another chunk of the fiber is ever so slightly shorter. And the rest of the fiber is an inch shorter. So on average, I'm just putting my combs away. Sorry for the banging. So on average, this fleece, this fiber, I should say, it's not a raw fleece, is this, yeah, so it's 11 inches. It's like off the camera, it's so long. So 11 inches is the longest. 7 inches is between 6 and 7 inches staple is the average. But there are some shorter bits at 4 inches. So this fiber ranges from 4 inches to 11 inches in staple, this particular prep, but the majority are going to be between 6 and 7 inches. So we're going to be keeping our hands quite far apart when we're spinning, and it's going to be very interesting to see how this sort of ends up and whether or not there is a sheen in the end. I'm so excited about this. You guys have no idea. Because of the long staple, I'm planning on spinning relatively fine. And it is a fiber that could spin up very coarse very quickly if you added too much twist. And it doesn't need a ton of twist because of these long staples. So I think that it's a fiber that, you know, probably isn't going to need tons and tons of twist. I'm planning on sampling it with a lower ratio to start off with, and just my default treadling speed, which tends to be very slow, and then see what kind of results I get from that. Now, if you don't want to buy this fiber for the study and these colors don't speak to you and it's not what you want to do, that's totally fine. If you'd like to still play along, all you need is to get some Mash'em. So please don't feel any obligation to buying the fiber, but it's really exciting to work away at something like this as a community, and that's why we do it. So this is the black. I'm so excited about this one. I'm going to move the other two out of the way. I'm really excited about this one. I didn't do as good a job of wrapping it. Actually, the black is the one that's still the dampest. I put them in, when I picked them up from Katrina this morning, they were still damp, and I put them in the bathroom with the heater on to get them to dry a little bit faster, and the other two are completely dry now, but this black one is still wet, and I think it's just Katrina probably had to rinse it a bit more because it's got more dye on it. Obviously the space dye white one, it dried the fastest, so I'm really excited about this one. So this colorway really made me think of Arctic berries from our fin study. Our fin study was last fall, and what made me really excited about this colorway and all this black is because all of these chunks of color that are in here, they'll mix with the black and it'll make it a really dark and very moody colorway. And why I'm excited about that is because to see those colors toned down from the black is going to be really interesting, but I think it's also going to be really pretty. There's a part of me that's really curious to see what this colorway plied with the white would actually look like. And I'm actually toying with the idea of taking a third of this and a third of the white space dyed and doing just that. But I really love black, and I really love how it spins up. And I think it's going to create just a really moody, dark piece of yarn with these really subtle flecks of color. And the Arctic berries was just exactly like that. One of the things that people did with the Arctic berries colorway, because it was very dark, it was dark red, dark green, and dark, was it purple? I can't remember. Katrina, was it purple? Purple, it was red, dark green, and I think it was dark purple. Anyways, that yarn, some people chain plied it, and so they preserved some of that color. But it still made it really moody and dark and interesting, and there was a lot of depth to it, and so I'm excited to see this one spun up. Blue and purple, that's right. I can't believe it was a year ago, and I'm like drawing a blank. Anyhow, really, really pretty. So there's a couple of questions in the chat channel, so just give me a second to answer them, and then we can move on. I'm glad that people have not spun Masham. I was kind of expecting that, so I'm excited that people haven't spun it. Does all the black dye bleed more when washing / setting? Becky's wondering, and are they they're all Masham, so the whole study is Masham. Katrina, maybe you can speak to the washing and setting. One of the things that I would probably say, these dyes are quite stable. But when you heat your yarns, if you're going to heat them, we're going to talk about that later today in some yarn that I have just washed and set. If you heat them and soak them in hot boiling water, there is a chance that the dyes will let go. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend sticking this one in a boiling pot of water for a really long time. So just think about that when you're going to wash and set your finished yarns. I wouldn't expect that they would bleed in a regular yarn wash, but I wouldn't start washing and soaking them in hot boiling water for very long because the dyes will become unstable. Oh, good. I'm glad you showed the space dyed on white first because the black is such a neat surprise. Yeah, it's kind of neat to see that difference. Like, they're very, very different. I'll just show the white one next to it, and then you can really see like how different they are. So this is the black one, and then look at how much brighter the white one is just because of the white. It's really, really cool. Yeah, I just love seeing the differences. And then of course here is the control. Let's see if I can stick it there. I'll stick it right in the middle. So the control is going to be really neat to see dyed up. And I'm excited to see what people do with this because everybody always has such amazing things that they do with their fiber. So just looking at the chat again, where can I go to read what we're actually studying? So in terms of what we're actually studying, the breed and color study is about learning color and breed. So it's an opportunity to spin together as a community and look at different colors and different ways that you can spin color. Your imagination is the limit. You'll see what I do with my fiber over the next, starting in January, over those 3 months, January, February, March. For lots of detail in terms of what I work on and what I create, you can check out the How I Spin content on Patreon. That content is completely devoted to what I do with my breed yarns. And starting in January, that content will also be accompanied with a vlog. So the vlog will be between 10 and 20 minutes long, and it'll talk about some of the decisions that I made while I was spinning, my sampling process, some of that different stuff. That vlog will also, starting in January, be available in the co-executive producer reward tier on Ravelry. And all of this stuff is going to be published in like an update to let you know some of the changes that are coming in the new year in December. So stay tuned for that. I think I had it timed for roughly around Christmas time. So watch for that. And we also, the community wanted to do a large spin along. So that is starting in January, and that is our 51 yarns spin along. That's based on JC Boggs Faulkner's book. And we will be starting that in January. The teaching content each month starting in January will be devoted to this book, and as will the Thoughtful Spinner. So the Thoughtful Spinner is a monthly downloadable PDF, as is the How I Spin content. It goes through everything that I've done, my spinning technique, my process, my finishing, all that different stuff. all of the details that I can't get to on the podcast every single week because there's just too much other stuff to talk about. And then the monthly vlogs for the teaching content and the monthly vlog for the How I Spin content will kind of be like this, except that it'll be sort of 10 to 20 minutes long, and it'll talk about some of the aspects of what I'm working on, but not as much detail as you'll find in the PDFs. So for more questions on that and more information on that, there will be stuff coming in December. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to comment on the Patreon posts. Comment in the housekeeping and announcements thread in Ravelry if you've got specific questions. And you can always message me directly on Ravelry as well for pearls, or on Patreon. And if you're a Patreon subscriber, make sure you're checking your Patreon messages and your Patreon emails and stuff, because that's how all of that stuff is published to you, as is Wool and Spinning Radio. So that is how Wool and Spinning Radio is released through the Patreon. And then once you get the RSS feed on the homepage of Patreon when you're logged in, and you'll hear a monthly conversation from me and Katrina every month, and that started last month, the monthly conversations. So kind of like Maker Radio, if you've been around for long enough that you'll remember Maker Radio, it's kind of like a rebirth of Maker Radio. So, all right, we are going to move on because it's all right. I talked about that for a long time. I knew that we would, because it's really exciting and we've been waiting. So November 23rd, and more on that will come. There will be Patreon posts for you guys announcing all of that, and then there will be a post on Ravelry as well. Okay, spinning growth. I'm going to switch the cameras and we are going to talk about Manic Spinner's recent project. This is going to scroll through. She wrote quite a long write-up on Ravelry, and I wasn't going to read it, but I decided that I would. So bear with me. And I hope that this is helpful, because there's a couple of things that I wanted to say about this. We're not going to go on and on about it. It's another fleece to sweater spin that somebody did, that Jillaine did, Manic Spinner on Ravelry. I hope I'm saying your first name right. And I think it's we did a sweater spin last time too, and there's so much learning that happens in these big projects. I've got a sweater spin in behind me right here on my dress form. You just learn so much when you're spinning that quantity of fiber. So let me read what she wrote. I'll be reading for a minute, but you can watch as the photos scroll through, and then as I read, you'll be able to kind of glean what she's talking about from watching the photos. All right, so she says, I have a passion for spinning different types of fleece. I particularly love fleece with a story. Through Fiber Trek, that's Sarah of Fiber Trek. If you do not watch her podcast, you need to be watching her podcast. It's awesome. She's a friend of mine, and I just have so much respect for everything that she's doing. I really, really want to go to one of her retreats one year. So one day I will be able to go. I'm hoping either this coming summer or the summer after that I will be able to go. Through Fiber Trek, I learned about Nash and Flat Islands, where no one lives but sheep, and how each year a team of folks go out and human shepherd the flock into a rough-hewn pen and shear them. They do an initial skirting before bagging them up, and then put them on a boat and take them back to the mill to the mainland to be processed and spun into yarn. Sarah has talked about some of this on the podcast, so if you want to know more about Nash Island, check out Sarah, and there's links through her website. When I learned that they withheld a few fleeces for hand spinners, I decided I must have one. I got a 5-pound lovely marled gray that was a pleasure to scour and then comb. Then I spun it, and I knew I wanted to spin for a long sweater's quantity. The results were all over the place. Some over twisted, some under twisted. Wraps per inch varied from 12 to 14 wraps per inch. And that said, the color effect was, the color effect was lovely. So if you look at her finished yarn and look at her finished jacket, it is incredible. I think sometimes we're our own worst critics. We've talked about that in this segment before. Like, we are so self-critical, and then look at that sweater. Like, it's amazing. The natural colors in the fleece really come through, and like, this is the blocked version photo there that just scrolled through, and like the interest is so fascinating, and I can just see the dyers in the crowd. I'm looking at you, Katrina, would just be like clamoring to get their hands on that to over dye it, because that white in there would just be amazing with some color on top, and then still having that dark gray. It's just amazing. So she says it's a wonderful variegation of grays and silvers. It really is. And I can see that white in there as well. It's just beautiful. Okay, so things that contributed to what she calls the crapola results that she got. I had to laugh when you wrote that, because we say that all the time here. I did not scour the fleece all at once, partly because I wanted to retain the lock structure and comb worsted, paying attention to the butt versus the tip end, and I didn't really have the facilities for doing all of this at once. She also says that she was moving during this time, and there were sticky batches while she was doing her small batch scouring. So one of the things that I would say is, if you know that you're going to move, this maybe the moving notice came at a time like where she'd already started scouring. But if you know you're going to have a water change, I personally would have stopped and waited until I was in the new place before I continued. I know excitement gets the best of us, but in this case, water changes can affect how our fleeces wash and scour. And then the other thing she doesn't say about what soap that she used, maybe with this, if there's sticky bits, maybe some of the lanolin didn't come off. These are sheep that are largely left throughout the year. They're not touched. There's no natural predators, I don't think. I think Sarah has said there's no natural predators out there. So anyways, something to think about. These are sheep that are basically, like, you know, rural. They're left. They're not farmed. And so, you know, there may be some inconsistencies in the fleece that you wouldn't necessarily get in fleeces that are raised for hand spinners. Just some stuff to think about. This is stuff that's kind of just off the top of my head that I wrote down as I was reading through this. And then some of those sticky bits, I would have probably rewashed them if it had been me, just to see if I could get that a little bit nicer. And then also inspecting the fibers to see if there's anything on there that maybe isn't what you maybe would expect. Maybe the sheep rolled in something, or another sheep threw something on them, because they like to eat off of each other's backs like a bunch of jerks. They get their fleece all dirty. So you never know what was maybe on there. Then she says, I started spinning it before I processed all of it. Not a good idea. I have done that. I always regret it every single time. She even says that later in her post, that she regretted it. She couldn't wait. I totally get it. I figured I'd default to my quote-unquote default spin and that I'd be fine. I didn't. As I pointed out above, I got anywhere from 12 to 16 wraps per inch. And she doesn't have enough, she says she doesn't have enough bobbins. So that's, that's kind of a problem, because I've run into this as well. This is where investing in some of the bobbins up that are really super cheap, some of those plastic bobbins that you can just wind on your drill or by hand, really help to get some weaving bobbins up. There's so many different brands out there. I have a whole bunch of the Ashford weaving bobbins. I don't find they're big enough. I need to get some new ones. Leclerc makes really big ones. I've heard Schacht makes really big ones. But get some storage bobbins, because for when you've got this many singles and you know you're spinning for this massive project, it's really worth it to wind your stuff off onto bobbins and to store them and to spin first spun with last spun, and number them and keep them organized. That's how you get the really amazing results. She didn't use a control card or tape on her lap to keep her distance of draft consistent. So some of that stuff is like rushing the process, right? And we've talked about that before. And I think with these big spins, she said that she had 5 pounds of this. It's a fiber that you've never spun before. It's a fiber that is largely left. There's not a lot of information out there on it. I would have spent a lot of time knowing what we know now, and if we were able to kind of go backwards and do it all over again, I probably would have spent a lot of time sampling and trying different drafts, trying different preps. You know, this is really long stapled and she really wanted to comb it. The locks on this are absolutely gorgeous. I probably would have combed it as well. But maybe instead of spinning really super worsted and getting that really overspun yarn, maybe not as you like if we did a short forward, for example, and we were smoothing the yarns, the fibers every single time, it makes this really dense yarn. Maybe that was too dense for this fiber. Maybe it needed to be spun short backward, not smoothing as you go. Maybe it needed to be short backward, you know, pinch, pull back, pinch, pull back, and letting go in between to allow that air to remain in there to get that loftier, lighter yarn. I think this was a 2-ply, if I remember correctly. And, you know, playing with yarn structure, you know, making a yarn that was rounder. There's so many things that in that sampling process that you would learn. And then the other thing too is in that sampling process, one of the things that I think we sometimes forget to talk about is it's not just sampling the yarn and sampling the fiber and getting sort of a sample that you like. And I'll give you an example. So this was a recent 2-ply plyback sample that I did, and I'll talk about this later in the show. To me, that's not a finished sample. I like to go one step further and I finish my yarn. So I will take off, you know, 5 to 10 grams and I'll actually wash it, finish it, dry it, and then decide if I want to spin that way or not, because you don't really know how the yarn's going to finish until you go through the entire process. And then if you're spinning for a big sweater like the one that I spun for in the back, I will knit a sample before I you know, absolutely commit to one way of spinning. I have my 3 or 4 knitted samples in my bag. I wonder if I can get them out. Sorry for the crinkling for just a sec. They were here. Of course, now they're not here. But I had like I think I had 3 knitted swatches of this yarn that helped me to inform my entire process. And I think when we're making slow cloth like this, you know, as soon as we rush the process, we end up disappointed, you know, and I think it's just such a great opportunity to remind ourselves that when we're making slow cloth, it's just that, it's slow, it takes a long time, and we can be really super excited about making these fibers and making these yarns and processing these fleeces and working with them. But you know, I'm just as terrible and just as guilty at this. We get so excited about the process and we want to just get it done because we're so excited to work with it. And I think sometimes I have to really stand back and I have to remind myself that being in the moment and being in the process and just enjoying what I'm working on at that time is slow cloth and is the excitement and where the learning happens, and that we have to hold that excitement and channel that excitement into our crafting by taking our time and learning as we go. The other thing that she said, because she had knitting problems, like row gauge and all that kind of stuff. That's just life with knitting. You're knitting someone else's pattern, and unless you're happy to do a lot of math and rework patterning and stuff, it's just part and parcel. You're not necessarily, when you're spinning for a project, you're not necessarily going to get row and stitch gauge, and that's where becoming more and more comfortable with our knitting and being able to modify patterns and whatnot is definitely it's just part and parcel. Yeah, and she mentions that one of her sleeves was bigger than the other. You know, again, checking your gauge as you're knitting, that's exactly what happened with me with the project behind me, which I'll talk about later in the show. You just have to be aware that you need to be constantly checking your gauge. So you need to know I find when I'm working with my hand spun yarns, I need to know my washed gauge and my unwashed gauge so that I can check it as I'm knitting my project, because it may or may not change as you're knitting, and the yarn might change just enough that your gauge changes and you need to change needle sizes, which is what happened behind me. So maybe that's a good segue, and we should talk about my sparkle cardigan really quick. Or do you guys want to hear about my finished spin? Do you want to hear about yarn or my sparkle cardigan? You can do either. I'm just going to switch my cameras around. And I'm going to look at the chat, because then I can answer questions. The chat's going crazy. So let me just have a quick look. You guys all want to know about my cardigan. Okay, cool. So we'll do the cardigan, and then I will show you my finished spin, because it is completely done and I'm excited to show it to you. And then we need to talk about finishing yarns, because I got completely screwed by that last night. So let me just switch over my cameras. Let me move over. Okay, so my sparkle cardigan I showed to you guys last show, and because it's been a bit of a delay between shows, we've had an absolutely crazy October. I was actually really glad not to have the live stream last week, because we actually ended up having to fly to Toronto on the spur of the moment. We had a death in our family and had to go for a funeral. So Mike had been flying back and forth, and then I had to join him, or not had to, but I chose to join him and to go. So I got a crap ton of spinning done. There's not time to talk about them today, but I finished a pair of socks on the airplane, and I will talk about these next time. I'm sorry to have to keep you hanging. It's just the show gets so long if I try to talk about everything in one show. And it's not fair to you guys, because then I always feel like it ends up getting rushed. And then do you remember the 4-ply yarn that I was working on? It is finished. It is amazing. I absolutely love it. I am so proud of this yarn. And I have been working away on socks. I cast these on the plane on the way home. So I will talk more about those 2 spins and those 2 yarns next time on November 28th, because we just don't have enough time to cover everything that I have been working on. Oh, thank you, Becky. Thank you for the condolences for our family. Yeah, it's been October with Halloween. I hate Halloween. I just want to put it out there. It is so challenging because it was right in the middle of the week this week. So we had Halloween. I had my spinning retreat with my girlfriends that I do every year. Me and Katrina go away with friends, with Heidi of Vegan Yarn, our friend Mari, our friend Jess, and Felicia of Sweet Georgia. And we go and we spin for the weekend, and it was so awesome. It was so great. We had a wonderful weekend. It was full of great food, great friendship. And then coming home and then having to go to Toronto, it was just, I didn't know if we were coming or going. So, and the kids, it's funny, Mike and I can handle that, right? Because we're just fitting in with all the things and doing all the things and kind of, but it's funny how you watch the kids it really starts to affect them. They don't know if we're coming or going and who's home and who's not home. And it's really interesting to see their little brains trying to process it all. Mommy and daddy are going home, but they're not taking it to Ontario, but they're not taking us to grandma and grandpa's. So what does that mean? And it's really interesting to kind of see them processing all of that. And we had some great conversations as a family about it. So some really positive stuff came out of it. And it was expected. It was an expected situation. So in some ways it made it a little bit easier for us to manage sort of the situation here at home. But yeah, just a lot of coming and going. And I have to admit, I was really relieved not to have to do the show on top of it, only because I don't think I would have been fully present. It's hard to be present and here with you guys when you're thinking about so many other things. And I know anybody who has any kind of a PR job or anything where you're interacting with other people on a very high level for an extended period of time, how hard it is to stay focused and stay in that place. And it wouldn't have been fair to you guys either. So yeah, so thank you. Routine disruption is so obvious with kids, but it can be a good reminder that it probably stresses grown-ups too. Yes, it's so true. We just hide it. And I think sometimes we suppress it just because we're in survival mode. Sparkle cardigan. I did not take this on the airplane. I decided to leave it at home. I put it on timeout. So I think it was last show, you guys. Oh, thank you, Britta. Thank you, Jess. I think I think it was last show, I showed you guys the sleeves and they were like 6 inches too big. So I took it on my spinning retreat and I was showing the girls, and many of you guys know all of them because they're all part of the Patreon community. And I was showing them and they were actually teasing me because I said my arms are so big, like my biceps are so big, and they were all teasing me because they're like, oh, you know. So it was actually quite funny. We had a really good laugh about it. But it made me kind of stop and go, okay, hang on a second. Because Hohi's patterns, this is a Hohi Locatelli pattern. I love her patterns. This is the Sparkle Cardigan. It was originally done in, I think it was Cash Luxe Spark by Sweet Georgia. And the thing with with her patterns is if I can get gauge, it's her patterns and Amy Christopher's patterns, they fit me like they were made for me. I don't know why, they just fit me. So when the sleeves were that far off, I was like, there's something going on with my gauge. Like there has to be. So I knit the body of this cardigan in 3.75 millimeter needles. And then I did the ribbing, which I sewed on, the 1x1 ribbing for the button band. I sewed it on, but I did it with 3.5 millimeter needles. And the ribbing at the bottom is done in 3.5 millimeter needles. And I'm fully expecting, based on my washed gauge swatch, that this will all relax quite substantially because the yarn overs will open up and the whole thing will just relax. So I thought there was something going on with my sleeves. So before I ripped them out, which I did the weekend before we left for our retreat, I checked my gauge, and sure enough, my gauge in the round was significantly bigger than my gauge back and forth. So what I did was I ripped it all out, both sleeves, obviously. I ripped out the sleeve caps because originally I was going to leave the sleeve caps and I was just going to re-knit from the armpit down. But I decided to go back to the beginning and start fresh because I wasn't super happy with some of my picked up stitching along the edge anyways. It was fine, but it was fine, which I just hate. So let me just turn this so you can really see the sleeve and the arm sky and everything. So my gauge was off in the round. It was significantly bigger. And the reason is because my purl rows are significantly tighter than my knit rows. So when I was working in the round, every single row was looser. So I downsized the 3.5 millimeter needles. And then the other thing that I did was, and yes, I had thought about knitting them flat. I totally thought about it. I didn't want to seam the sleeves because of having to match up all of these rows of lace, and that is why I didn't seam it. I just was like, I can't handle fiddly right now. I need finished. So that is why I didn't knit them flat. So I knit for this cardigan. I'm just looking at my pattern because I don't want to mess up when I'm telling you guys, and I feel like I could very easily. I knit for the sizes. This is what happens to my patterns as I like work through stuff. Like I just write all over them. I have notes. I have all this stuff written down. Where is the sizing? Sizing, where are you? I feel like I chose the second to smallest size. I feel like that's what I did. So for the sleeves, because the original sleeves were so big, and I knit the third size of sleeves, because more often than not, I knit one size bigger for sleeves because of my biceps. So every time I say that from now on, it's going to make me laugh because they were all teasing me so much. And I have to say, one of the girls that was there, I won't say who, just in case she doesn't want us to want everybody to know, but she's a power lifter, and her arms are massive in such a good way. So then I was like, I felt silly, like complaining. I wasn't complaining. I was just stating fact about how big my biceps were. And then we had a good laugh about it later because it was like, okay, yes, we both lift weights, but I don't lift nearly what she lifts. And it just made me laugh. The whole thing was ridiculous. So normally in sweater patterns, I will go up the next size. So let's say I'm knitting the 36-inch bust size. Let's just say it's the medium. If there's a so if it's like 36 inches for the bust and that's the size that I chose, I will usually knit the sleeves that are for like the 38-inch bust or even the 40-inch bust, whatever the next size is, because of my arms. And also because I like to wear a t-shirt underneath, and it gives me enough ease to be able to do that. So with these, because I had already knit the one size up and I'd had such a difficult time with it, I recalculated my gauge based on my swatch, and I actually ended up knitting the smallest size sleeve, and they fit perfectly. So when they wash and when all of these yarn overs and everything open up, it's all like the sleeves are just going to be absolutely perfect on me. And then the other thing that I had changed, I had decided not to knit the full length sleeves. I decided to knit sleeves that just came to about here, because I'm constantly pushing my sleeves up, and I didn't want to push my sleeves up on this. So the sleeve comes to about here, which is perfect. That's exactly what I wanted. So I had done a tubular cast off with my original sleeves that I pulled out. I ended up just doing a regular cast off. I didn't do the tubular bind off again. Part of that was because when I finished the other sleeve, I wanted to see whether or not I liked a little bit more ribbing at the bottom. Like I could add like another 1/2 inch to 1 inch of ribbing. And so I thought, well, if I like that, then I might go back and rip out this side and add that extra ribbing on the end. So I was like, I'm not doing the tubular bind off again. I didn't do a tubular bind off on the lower edge. I probably should have. It would look really, really nice and really professional and really finished. I didn't. So I thought having a matching cast off edge on the bottom ribbing and then on the sleeve would work well. So I abandoned the tubular bind off. She doesn't call for it in the pattern. She just says bind off in pattern. It was just something that I really liked the finished aesthetic of, and then I decided I'm not going to rip it out again, so I'm just going to do a regular bind off. So if I wanted the same pattern again, I have to print it out because I've scribbled all. Yeah, it's so true. I find the longer that you've been knitting for and the more mistakes that you've made as a knitter, the more notes that I keep. Do you know what I mean? Like I used to kind of only keep I used to only write down the odd thing, and I found like over the last little while that I write so many notes, and I've been knitting for a really super long time, and so I think it's part of that. Like I've made so many mistakes over the years that I just write everything down, and I don't mind ripping my knitting out. Like I know that might sound really surprising to people, but it actually really doesn't bother me. To me, I would rather have a finished object that I'm really proud of, and I'm happy to do that. So yeah, it takes longer. Yes, stuff sometimes gets put on timeout, but really it's okay in my book. Finished yarn. So do you remember my llama and silk roving, pin drafted roving? It was in my stash forever. I really, really wanted to get it spun. I was really excited to spin it. And I couldn't figure out, I think I'd mentioned to you guys that I wasn't sure how much silk was in it. So when I finished spinning, the bag that it had originally been sitting in finally came free because it was all tangled in the roving, and I didn't want to take it out and possibly mess up the fiber itself. It's 10% silk. So this was my control card, and I'll just hold it up for you guys to see. So the singles were spun on a 14:1 ratio, and then my two ply back sample. So it doesn't really matter what the ratio was that I spun this on. It's more what the bumps per inch are. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7.5 bumps per inch was my 2-ply back sample, and then for my finished yarn I plied it quite a bit tighter. So I had a total weight of 530 grams of this fiber, and this is a local to me fiber. It's from Rossdale up in the Okanagan. So this is unfinished, this one over here. It's a little bit fuzzy. The color is still very much intact, which I will talk about in a minute. So let me refocus. It's a little bit fuzzy, and it's You can see the yellow sort of streaked through it, but it's still the tawny brown color of the llama fiber. It's a baby llama. Very fine. Obviously, there's very little elasticity to this fiber. The camelids are not known for their elasticity. Every skein is roughly 200 yards. They're all over 200 yards, but I had a total of a skein of 228, 206, 216, and 205 or something. So they were all like sort of around 200. This one was finished the way that I normally finish fiber. So it was finished in a warm water bath, warm with eucalyptus, soaked for a few minutes. But it's still, when I pulled it out, it's still same as this one. It sort of has like a not a stickiness to it, but it made me wonder if the saracen on the silk hadn't been fully removed, because it does have, in certain parts of it, it has sort of like I can only describe it as like a bit of a stickiness or like a bit of a gumminess. So I decided to try finishing it a different way. And that is why these two skeins look different in color from these two, because I did these two in hot water on the stove. The temperature I brought up to just over 100 degrees Celsius. And the color in the silk bled everywhere, and it came out. And I knew that that was a chance that I was taking, so it dyed the llama fiber, which is why the color difference between the four skeins. So these two are the same, even though this one's not washed yet, and then these two are basically boiled, and they're quite a bit darker and they're more golden yellow. So you lose those hints of yellow like you can see in here, and the whole thing kind of becomes yellow. I'm not sure how I feel about that. I'm kind of disappointed, to be honest. But then on the other hand, the gumminess and the stickiness is gone and the yarn feels better. So I'm kind of torn, you know, which one like I like better. I think from an aesthetic point of view, I like these ones better, but from a knitting with and from a feel standpoint, I like these two better. But it's a bummer that the silk bled so badly. So I'm going to have to boil the other two skeins because I'm going to have to make them match. I don't want to have two skeins that look this different from each other, because the plan is to use them together in a project. I had thought about over dyeing them. I really love this yellow color. So this is my absolute most favorite color. For those who don't know, my absolute most favorite color in the whole wide world is this color. And I know a lot of people out there don't love yellow and it's not their favorite color, but I am one of the few people that can actually wear this color. And I just absolutely love it. And it's been my favorite color for a very, very long time, probably since I was like 17 or 18. So 20 years. And yeah, I just love it. So I actually really love this. I just am bummed that you lose that tawny brown. That you lose that really beautiful kind of gray tawny brown. That's all. It's not that these aren't really pretty. And actually, when I unskein them, because all of that gumminess and that stickiness is gone, the hand of this yarn, like the drape, is just incredible. It's really, really pretty. And I have 800 yards to play with. And it's just got a lovely, lovely, it just hangs beautifully. But it turned golden yellow. So get rid of this gummy stickiness, and have the yellow on the silk bleed, or have it gummy and sticky but have this really beautifully spun yarn. Let me see if I can pull it up close and you guys can really see that yellow in there. I don't know if it's too dark. Might be too dark. It's probably a bit too dark for you guys to see. But it is pretty different. Maybe if I unskein it. Monitors are so weird. You're right, Rebecca. It's hard. The monitors, like the live stream is awesome and doing the podcast is so awesome. But I totally get why people like to do things in person. Do you know what I mean? Like there's just nothing like being in person. Yeah, you can really see the difference there. I think. Yeah. So this one still needs to be washed and boiled. I think the other one, I'll do it at the same time. I did these two together, and I'll do these two as well. And yeah, we'll see how I end up. In terms of grist, I ended up with, I think it's 500 and, I'll just look it up because I wrote it all down. My wraps per inch for this yarn is roughly 10 wraps per inch. So it's sort of, I classified it as a worsted weight. I think it's probably kind of a DK worsted. And my grist, oh, it didn't, Ravelry didn't save it because it didn't like me putting in approximately. Let me just do my grist really quickly. So that I can share it with you guys. So my grist is 730 yards per pound. So it's not great. 730 yards per pound for, and this is 530 grams. Oops. And this is roughly 850 yards of yarn here. So I got pretty good yardage. I was intentionally spinning thicker. I have ended up with so much fingering weight yarn. If you can believe it, and I'll talk about this next show, those socks that I just finished spinning and knitting, so my red ones that I showed you, that's a 4-ply yarn, and I'm knitting those socks on 2mm needles, and I probably should have gone down to 1.75, which I refuse to do, partially because I don't have 1.75mm needles, and partially because it's like, oh my goodness, like 4-ply yarn and I have to downsize my needles. Like, it's just crazy. So I think I talked about this on the podcast before. I was really craving some thicker yarn. And I am looking forward to knitting with this just for something that's kind of a, I don't know, how would you guys describe it? Like sort of a quick knit, I guess. I was actually thinking about the cardigan by Kate Davies. That cardigan has that really cool shaping in the front, and I think it's knit, let me just look it up really quick and then we'll say goodbye. Llama is a pretty dense fiber though, so I would expect a lower grist. Yes, that is a very good point, Becca. So the camelids do tend to be much denser. It's just like the long wools. Like, you're not going to get as much fiber per pound or yarn per pound of like Teeswater or Borderless or even BFL as you will of like Cormo or Merino or Rambouillet. Like, they're just different fibers. They're denser. This is exactly the same. It's a dense yarn. It's a dense fiber. And you're not going to get those really high grists. I could have spun this really, really super fine and gotten a really, really fine yarn, but I was really craving a quicker spin than that, and I just love the results. Oh, it calls for Erin weight, hey? Because she uses, I thought she held the DK double. Is that right? I'm looking at the project page here, but I don't want to waste time reading. I know there's people in our community that have looked at this cardigan and maybe even knit it themselves. I don't like the doubled over collar just because with this yarn, it would just be way too thick. But I think I could knit the collar on really super tight needles and adjust my gauge, and then it would still stand up really nicely. Yeah, you're right, Rebecca. She holds the DK double. I thought I remembered reading that. So bulky yarns can be used instead as a, so I might just adjust my gauge. I've done that with lots and lots and lots of patterns where I swatch and then I do all the math to adjust. So I'm thinking about that because actually I have enough yardage for that. So, because it's held double. So for a, for the size that I would want to knit, I would need 1,200 yards of DK because it's held double. So I think I could eke out, especially not holding the collar double and not necessarily doing long sleeves. So I could modify it in a couple of places. Yeah, so yeah, socks on 1.75 is nuts. That's what Eve said. I refuse to go lower than 2mm. I totally agree. Yeah, it's funny. So that yellow is coming up as lime green on the monitor, and it's funny how that happens. So I wonder, I would love to know from you guys, when this gets uploaded later this evening and you're watching it for like different parts that you wanted to watch again or see, can you let me know if the feedback when it gets uploaded is that as well? I'm very curious to know if it is still would register as lime green or not, because on my monitors it looks accurate and looks normal, but I know when it goes through the live stream it's not necessarily the same. So I'm just curious. All right, I think that's it for today. Let me just look at my notes. That was everything. I wanted to talk about this, and I wanted to talk about the breeding color study, and I want to talk about my Sparkle cardigan. Next time we will talk about socks and all things sock yarn. I'm trying to think of what's going on right now in the Patreon content. We're doing socks right now. We're just finishing up with the reflection between the worsted spun and the woolen spun socks. And then next month, we're going to be looking at socks that I designed from start to finish. So I hope that you guys are finding value there and that you're enjoying that. And until next time, have an amazing couple of weeks. Happy spinning. The update from Katrina will be on November 23rd for the breed and color study, and I will be talking to you guys again on November 28th on the Wednesday, again at 12:30 Pacific Standard Time. So I hope that you're able to join us. Until next time, happy spinning, and thank you so much for joining me today and for being here and for taking some time out of your day. I really appreciate it, and it just is such a pleasure to be able to do the live stream and have the opportunity to interact with you guys and to catch up and to talk about the things that we love so much. And I will keep you posted about this yarn and how it gets finished. So maybe next time I'll have a new cardigan cast on. We'll see. All right, until next time, happy spinning. Bye everyone.